Nicholas, Olga, thank you very much for inviting us, and I'm always happy to be between friends, and congratulations to you and all the Capital Link team for an excellent organization. I will be extremely short. It's good to see that ESG initiatives and ESG awareness is increased every year. However, it's important to remember why this is important, because it's a response to a threat to our planet and our society, actually. It's all about what world we live in and what world we will deliver. We have heard a lot of interesting views and opinions, and I'm extremely happy to be among two distinguished members of the Greek American Business Society who are here to share with you their insight and views on ESG initiatives. I would like to welcome Mr. Metropoulos, Chairman and CEO of Metropoulos & Co., and Mr. John Koudounis, President and CEO of Calamos Investments. I do not think more introductions are required for those two gentlemen in this room. I would like first to invite Mr. Metropoulos to share with us his thoughts on ESG. You can take the podium. Nicholas, I know time is of the essence, so we'll try to be, actually we will not try, we will be on time. We have 10 minutes.
I can't handle 10 minutes. I feel very passionate about the subject, so Nicholas, do this for me when you want me to. ESG means environment, social, and governance. Governments, businesses, and citizens are urgently embracing the needed changes to protect our environment, to provide a better social equality for human beings around the world, particularly genre, men and women, and race. It's very, very uneven all over the world. We need governance to ensure that we take the types of actions and to hold accountability and create transparency in order to achieve these targets. What's the urgency? Our environment is under tremendous, tremendous pressure. Carbon emissions, which is carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxides, are causing rapid rising temperatures all over the world. We see every day the incredible results. Friends are calling me from New York, telling me fires in Nova Scotia and Quebec are covering all of New York, New Jersey, Washington. You can't see it. Australia, a couple of years ago, we saw fires killing millions, literally millions of little animals. The temperature has risen twice as fast in the past 30 years as it did from 1880 to 1980. They expect the temperature to rise 2.7 degrees Celsius in the next 27 years. It's a huge issue, and the most affected areas are the North and South Pole. The South Pole is they're beautiful, beautiful ecosystems for the whole humanity and the globe. In the ocean itself, they're breaking up. We see them regularly, these big chunks of ice floating into the oceans, and it's a real crime. The ocean absorbs 91% of the energy of the Earth. 91%. They're measuring temperatures going down 2,000 meters in the ocean for the past 20 years. Those temperatures have risen dramatically. And what happens? When the temperature of the ocean rises, it absorbs less, and the temperature continues to accelerate around the Earth. That is a major problem. 150 billion tons of ice is floating around the world and has raised oceans by 10 inches. By 2050, they expect it to go 20 inches, which is a half a meter higher with these rising temperatures around the world. There are also 33 deserts in the world. It's incredible. They're expanding between 14 and 18% per year, the size of the country of Poland, every single year. The biggest deserts, even though you don't see them as deserts, is the South Pole, because it's all mountains, no life, and glaciers. The biggest desert, the South Pole, is 14 million square miles. The North Pole, 13.9 million. They're melting. They talk about the past 15 years, 25 meters of less glaciers covering these poles, and we're seeing it on the ice forming. The biggest deserts in the world are those two. Sahara is 3.2 million square miles, the Sahara Desert. But that's not the issue, and that's growing rapidly. There are 4 deserts in Africa: the Sahara in the north, Sahel in the middle, Kalahari in Namibia. The Sahel Desert is expanding at 1,200 kilometers a year. And there's more problems than that, because we as human beings are eating more beef, more meat, and those animals are grazing. And they're huge sandstorms. I don't know if you've seen on TV, huge waves of sandstorms that blow through, and they're finding African sand all over the world. South America, Europe, Asia, all over the United States. They find in Brazil, Arizona, sand from Africa. So the acceleration of the deserts are a major problem. The Gobi Desert, which is the 5th largest desert between China and Mongolia, is expanding at 620,000 kilometers. 620 kilometers per year. It is remarkable. The Sahara, by the way, the Great Australian Desert, we saw the fires a few years. That's 1 million square miles. That's expanding as well. Incredible. The third issue, deforestation. One of nature's best gifts to humanity was the Amazon forest. The Amazon forest is the most diverse. I remember when I was a kid, I was going to Brasilia. It was a new state. It's the biggest city in Brazil. It's the capital of Brazil. And I remember I used to take trips in the Amazon. It is the richest, most beautiful, diverse forest in the world. It covers Bolivia, Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, all over. It's down significantly, both for cattle, for agriculture, soy. They raise a lot of soy there. It is contracting dramatically. These forests, and by the way, there are many, everywhere from Lagos, Nigeria, all over the world, they're beautiful forests. They're reducing, they're declining rapidly. The Amazon absorbs, all the forests absorb carbon dioxide and clean the oxygen for us to live. And that's a shame that we're losing these forests so rapidly, and the deserts are expanding very rapidly. Now, what is the issue behind all of this? The issue is population growth. Population in 1800 was 1 billion people in the world. 1960, 160 years later, there are 3 billion people. Today, 8.047 billion people, going to 10 billion in 27 years. Now, they say by then it will taper off, and we do have many places in the world, Greece for one, Europe, the US, the more educated, advanced nations, where it's difficult, challenging. China, as you know, had a one-child policy. They raised that because people are looking for labor. And therefore, it's a challenge to see this population, but it's going to continue to grow. And that's not the only issue. Population is growing older. In 1950, the average age in the world was 48 years old. Today, it's 75. My wife sponsors this wonderful cancer research center at the Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York. It's the best cancer hospital. And I was there about a month ago at a board meeting. And they're talking, they have a new vaccine. They're going to do trials now. They have proved it at the lab that attacks the rogue cells and cures 71% of cancers. So we live longer. We're going to live healthier. That doesn't mean mental health is a major issue, by the way, around the world. All over the world, it's a set. I can't take 3 minutes. If I have a gun, I shouldn't be here. So, I mean, so I'm sorry. Anyway, governments are embracing, I'll move it forward. Governments are embracing, we're talking about ESG. This slide shows what governments have been doing just in the past few years. They're taking a lot of steps to promote and introduce ESG around the world. I was at a conference just a few weeks ago in Los Angeles, 68 countries, 5,000 executives, business, bankers, investors. Everybody's talking ESG. 2 issues there were biotechnology for new medicines and ESG. ESG is being embraced. It's being discussed extensively around the world. You can move the, let me go. These are some of the subjects, but it's far from being effective all over the world. It's, in fact, time notwithstanding, I cut an article out of the Wall Street Journal a couple of days ago. It talked about Exxon, Chevron, and British Petroleum. Shareholders in the past 3 or 4 weeks, they proposed several ESG projects that they wanted to take as corporations. Their shareholders turned it down. Often the returns on investment, I heard some of the conversation about private equity. Yes, money is available, tremendous money is available for ESG. But you know the first thing they promote? Their returns of how quick did they get their returns? 2 years, 3 years, how quick? And that's what attracts the capital to invest behind them. So it's a real challenge to balance. That's where governance comes in, to make sure there's some responsibility for transparency for these investments and to ensure we do comply with the promises we make as businessmen. I can tell you in many of our factories, AI, and I loved what he talked about, Peter Diamandis. Peter Diamandis is my lovely friend and hero. He's written many books. He recently sent me a book, The Future's Closer Than You Think. It talks about AI and the impact it has in designing much more efficient buildings. Many of our plants are robotic. Robots have changed the nature of how we do business in the US. It's a lot more efficient from a labor point of view, from electricity, timing, everything about them is, so technology and AI will be significant, make significant progress to us as we move forward in the next 10 to 15 years. The other thing, we see, keep in mind also electric vehicles. Today, only 14% of the vehicles being produced are electric. We see that going to 75% by 1940. That means the old cars are still going to be around, they're still going to be consuming fuel, but 75% will be, they're building better batteries and infrastructure and so forth. So the other huge concept, and by the way, solar, hydro energy is a phenomenal development that's going to accelerate, but again, paybacks and invest on those investments are a little slower, and we need to push all of us, anything we can do to move forward. Nuclear fusion is an incredible, it harnesses the sun's energies with lasers and hydroatoms, and that within the next 10, 15 years, it's still in trial, is going to really make renewable energy the future and much healthier. Do we have time to accomplish this? I don't want to, agriculture, there's so many things. We have a program with the Gates Foundation in Africa where we have a 1 acre, it's called. 1 acre of land was producing 9 years ago only 2.6 tons of food. Today it's 11.6. Genetic engineering of the seeds, drip systems for watering them versus just spraying and wasting a lot of water, and much more efficient. You don't need the land because everything's getting dry. We're vertical farming. There's a lot of progress around agriculture as well. I don't want to leave this issue because social issues around the world are a major problem. 10% of the world's children, 60 million children, do not go to school. 400 million people have no access to health care. Incredible. By the way, Scandinavia, Europe do better than even the US in some of these frontiers. According to the World Hunger Organization, 828 million people, that's 10% of the population, is struggling to meet food needs for their families. Only with 31% of young girls go to a secondary school. That compares to 88. Women in similar jobs are earning 76% what men do, and 70% of the rights that men have in almost every part of society today. Racial inequality is terrible. Traditions go back to centuries in many countries. Not too long ago, Melinda Gates went to try to organize women in India to protect young girls who are given away at the age of 13. They have no bodily autonomy. And it is incredible how the challenges around the social issue, and we need to change behaviors and the whole discussion of ESG. And it's taken a lot of active action to include people around the world around ESG, is really activating and uniting a lot of people around us. So I have a bunch of other comments I'd love to make, but I'm going to stop there. And by the way, let's move forward with a couple of these. I do want to make one more remark. This here says $1 trillion was invested in ESG in 2019. This year we will have $3.6 trillion invested. Now the question is, we talk about investing, and yes, we do invest, but are we executing and achieving the objectives that we're talking about, the shareholders and folks like around this room. Are we truly achieving that? The fact that we're talking about it, embracing it, we all feel good about it, I think that is a very strong step forward. Technology and AI is another very strong step forward. But are we going to be in time to make a lot of these changes to save our environment and save our children's future? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That has been inspiring indeed. So, yeah. He volunteers. So, questions, views later on. Mr. Koudounis, the floor is yours.
We want to help people, want to give people access, and want to give back to the community, which is something that is very important for me and my family. Let's try to change the world.
It's incredible, the tradition. We're honored to be here and humbled to be here at the New York Stock Exchange. We're really, really happy that all of you are here to join us in this great day.
Thank you to everybody. This has been an amazing day. Can never take these things for granted. Going through this experience with my partners and my families has been unbelievable. We want to help people, want to give people access, and want to give back to the community, which is something that is very important for me and my family. Let's try to change the world.
I think we're good. It's incredible, the tradition. We're honored. All right. Kalispera. So today, we'd like to talk a little bit about investing in ESG. I think Dini did a fantastic job of making us all aware how the environment is definitely something that we should concentrate in. And it's real. It's something that is dear to, I think, everybody's heart, right? It's one part of ESG, as we say, but it's a very, very important part. And we need to do something about it. So I know that we invest at Calamos Investments in a lot of different industries. But we're seeing how ESG is the fastest growing sector in the world in terms of investing. And it's something that's dear to my heart, and we thought that we wanted to get into the business and be able to have a team that knows how to do it, that's been doing it for a long time. And so I went out and looked for a group. It took about 3 years. And found a team that's been doing this for over 25 years. They're based out of Portland, Oregon. And they're actually the first team to invest in a fossil-free fund 25 years ago, before ESG was actually an acronym, before it was trendy, before there was a lot of awareness in sustainable investing. And I think that's really important because they have a proprietary screening method that's very, very effective, and also has been proven that you could actually invest in ESG and get returns. So in some of their domestic strategies, their benchmarks against the S&P. And so when I was looking for a team, it's one thing to be able to invest in ESG, but can I sell the funds? We're in the business. We have a fiduciary responsibility to our clients to give them performance. So if I could find a team that could be sustainable, invest in a method that's sustainable, and in their domestic strategies beat the S&P, then that's something really, really special. Because a lot of people can't even beat the S&P no matter what they invest in, let alone invest in ESG. And this team's done it every year since inception for over 25 years. So there's no guarantees that they can, past performance has future performance, but we're hoping that that's the case. So about a year and a half ago, I acquired this team right about when I met Giannis on a Tacumba. And so one of the things that we realized very quickly with Giannis is that we have a lot of shared values, whether it be the family, community, economic development and empowerment, of course, environmental sustainability. And one of the things too is financial literacy was something that really hit home for Giannis and myself. And so we realized we had a lot of shared values and we became friendly very quickly. And he was like, Mr. John, he calls me, what can we do together? I want to do a fund and stuff. And I said, this is perfect. Let's form a joint venture. So we're partners 50-50, where we can do something together that epitomizes who you are and who we are, who I am and who our firm is as people, where we can try to do some good and launch some of these ESG funds. Now, for those of you that want to, let's put a framework around how big and how important ESG is in an investable world. Dina just said that we expect $3 trillion to be invested this year. If you look back in 2016, the market of investable assets in ESG was around just over $22 trillion, okay? At the end of 2022, not that long, 6 years later, we're around $41 trillion. So think about that growth. Now, if you look at some of the statistics in Bloomberg, by 2025, which is only a couple of years from now, we're expecting to be over 50 trillion of investable assets will be in ESG. If you want to put this in the conceptual of the market, the entire market of investable assets is $140 trillion, and we expect in 2025 for 50 trillion. So it's over a third of all investable assets. So is ESG a fad? ESG is real. It's the fastest growing asset class. Unfortunately, the United States is behind Europe and other parts of the world, but it's catching up because it's serious. And it needs to be taken in a lot of different ways, and all the companies now some are being mandated. And I don't feel that anybody should be mandated to invest in whatever they want. We have funds that invest in energy and everything else. But if you wanted to have an offering in ESG for people that do want to invest in that. So I think it's important for free choice, but I also think it's people need to be aware, and the companies are also being run now in both a more societal and also a more governance way. So we're excited to get into the business with professionals that have been doing it as long as anybody, that have a proven track record. And we're excited to do some good in this market. And in one of our launches, we will be, as you saw on the stock exchange in the short film, that was our global ETF that we launched. We're in the midst with the central banks in Europe to approve what they call a UCITS, so we could offer our funds in Europe. And we're also going to look at potentially doing a UCITS ETF. So we want to make sure that anybody who wants to buy this anywhere in the world can. If we have a Greek 10-year-old who's wearing Giannis's jersey that wants to invest, we're going to be able to do it in small amounts of increments of $25 to multi-millions that we'll be selling to a lot of the big sovereign funds and whatnot. So it's part of the financial awareness and being able to have it and have everybody be able to participate in that. And so that's what we're trying to do. And just a little bit, who knows how much we can do, but at least we want to try to do something. And I think it's, imperative that we all look at it that way. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That has been very vivid, and it gave a realistic perception of what is ESG, not just theory. But I would like to expand on the development of ESG during the last decade. I can tell you from my perspective as a lawyer, when we first saw and when we were 10 years or so ago, and we started putting fancy paragraphs about ESG investing, nobody had a clue. I can guarantee you that. But things have changed, right? So how have you seen it developing during the last decade?
There's been a tremendous amount of change. I'd say the biggest turning point in ESG is probably around the crisis in 2008, when the world was upside down. And I think a lot of people were looking at it differently after that and weren't afraid to speak up about what was really something that was important to them. And I think also a lot of the younger generation, we're seeing a huge interest in buying in ESG in the family office sector of second generation that are younger, people that are actually retired and leaving their fortunes to their children. And they have different priorities than sometimes our parents and others people had, who needed to survive, to make money and do everything. And some of the people that have success, their kids don't have to worry about other things that others have had. And so they're worrying about things that actually make a difference in the total world, like the environment. And so there's a huge interest there just because of the demographics as well. And also, we're seeing it also with older people too, starting to buy into this. And I'm not advocating that any government should force people to invest in anything that they don't want to invest in. But I do feel that it should be people's choices and that there should be products out there that can do some, good and can perform. Because at the end of the day, if you lose money investing in ESG, then we don't stay in business, and at the end of the day, they're not going to continue to invest as well. And we provide liquidity for these companies that do the right thing and follow some of these, and that's what we want to do, reward the companies that they're not necessarily cleaning up the world, but they're not doing some of the things that are very harmful as others are.
Well, thank you. Well, I'd like to take this pass and give it to Mr. Metropoulos. Investing and ESG. Well, investing, it's mainly about getting returns and get optimized returns. So how does this tie in with ESG? Can it be on the same boat? Is it conflicting? What's your opinion on that?
I think you can accomplish both. But I do think, unlike what John said, I think the government has to play a little more of a role, because it's not always obvious that we're out there to protect the environment with energy or fossil fuels. We should be using more solar energy today. We should be using more. There's many opportunities for different types of energy. So I think the government has to. I love capitalism, the free world. That's what drives innovation and change. But at the same time, we have to push forward. I'll tell you something the government in the U.S. has been doing lately, and we're behind still. Scandinavia is the best. Europe is. We're beginning to have to report. I know all of our businesses are reporting quarterly all kinds of social issues. How many people we have on the board? What are women making for accounting and this and that? We're reporting it. Now, I haven't gotten any feedback from the government on that yet, but I assume the fact that you have to report it, it causes people to think about what they're doing in their organization. So it is being embraced. We talked about the Paris Accords in 2015. 193 countries signed it, and they embraced it. And there have been several meetings since that have augmented the efforts around social and environmental. But returns on investment can be, as I said, we've introduced robotics and AI in many businesses that make them so much more efficient and yet far more energy friendly. We hope to embrace, I'm all over this nuclear fusion. I think it's a big part of the future. It's going to cost us millions to convert a lot of our investments to that, but the paybacks are going to be very attractive with the technology of nuclear fusion. And it's going to make it'll be a planet that's energy clean within the next I hope sooner the better, the 25 years that say that we should have 75% pure clean energy in our environment. And I think the paybacks, by the way, you said that $194 trillion will be spent in this space over the next 15 years. A lot of new opportunities for investors, for careers, and all of that. But are we in time? I'm very concerned at the acceleration of the environment. And by the way, a lot of our countries are addressing the social issues. There are a lot of parts in the world that are not changing their traditions and a lot of their behaviors that go back centuries and how they treat a lot of people. I see even in the US, there's still a lot of biases in a lot of places. So we need to be talking about it in groups like this and all of us feeling it, and we do make a difference.
Thank you. Well, I keep what you say also about public government initiatives. So it's not only about regulation of imposing, it's about giving incentives for ESG investing. And I also heard what you say about reporting, and you say that something has to do about this reporting, so it has to be used creatively, not just put it, file it, and right? Right. So going back to investors, how do you feel about the scrutiny, the ESG scrutiny happening on investments, and what's your view on the development of ESG from now on?
There is tremendous amount of scrutiny that's happening now in ESG. And so there's a term called greenwashing, which a lot of people like to talk about how they're involved in ESG and they're kind of exaggerating actually what they're doing in terms of how good, ESG is as well. I like the green tie, by the way. But I think that, I think it's a good thing, right? I mean, I think people need to be accountable. And I think, like Dean said, I think, we have a committee that our top executives are part of that always focuses within our own firm on all these issues, whether it be diversity within the firm, diversity within our board, whether it be, socially what we do for the community, and all our managers, not just our ones that are specific to their strategies in ESG, but in all the stuff, we screen all our funds, we make sure that they're aware of it. And so the awareness has increased tremendously throughout the years, and the scrutiny from the SEC and other regulators has increased tremendously. And we see this in the papers and everything, from the biggest firms in the world, like BlackRock, to everybody. But I think that's a good thing. And people should stay up to those standards, because that's the only way we can be accountable. And if people have procedures in place and have proper governance, and my job as a CEO is to do that, I'm very comfortable of opening, the hood and having the regulators, which they're in my offices every day anyways, scrutinize, because I'm confident that, we're following things above and beyond, because I think it's important. Not because I'm being told to do it, because we want to do it. But if others have to be told, so be it. But that's very, very important. And we're going to continue to see more scrutiny, for sure, as it gets even more popular in the United States, and the United States catches up to Scandinavia and Europe and the rest of the world.
And I think that's the most important, awareness and action, actually. And this starts providing the solution. Probably this is the legacy that we want to deliver. So speaking about legacy, I see a glass of water there. I'm trying to think how we'll close that. Is it half empty or half full? So I heard you posing twice the question, are we in time? Do we have time? So do we have time?
Humans are remarkably resourceful. And I think technology and AI will give us the tools to be able to speed. But human behavior is hard to change. And you mentioned half water. We have all these waters in the U.S. with plastic bottles, all the brands in America. And it's remarkable to me, human beings, rather than recycle them, put them in, they throw them in the street. Our oceans, our rivers are full of rubbish. Terrible, terrible. So it is very hard. So yes, I am positive about, and I think technology will enable us to speed up our response to the deterioration of our environment and addressing some of our social problems, because I think that's equally important. But it's a challenge because I think our world will be a little different today than 25 years from today. And I see some negative tides, but I think humans are very resourceful with the tools of technology, AI, with electric vehicles and hydrofusion and all of that. I think we will address them and begin to reverse these tides.
Yes, I think it's true. We're capable of the best and the worst with humans. Let's hope this will bring up the best of our qualities and character. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I feel we had a complete, let's say, approach on the subject. Of course, Mr. Metropoulos and Mr. Koudounis are available to answer any questions that you have after. Or do we have time for questions? Okay.
We're direct investors, but we also take control of these businesses, and so we can push for decisions. At the end of the day, returns on investment, we're very disciplined in a lot of our decisions, and so they play into our decision making. But I'll tell you, in many cases, they do pay back, and if you really create a culture within your organization that addresses ESG, social issues, as well as the environment, you'll be surprised, particularly if you have meetings at the executive levels and you maybe go through the operations. And investors, if I partner with Apollo or Blackstone on something, I got to tell you, we often talk about, we're looking at 2 chemical companies right now with another large, and the first question I asked, what are some of the commitments over the next 3 years? This is a $10 billion dollar business. What will be the ESG commitments and what are the objectives? And by the way, they do have some objectives, as we've gone through a lot of due diligence in the past 4 months. They do have a lot of objectives. My job, I'm the director and I'll be the chairman, I got to push to ensure that we measure some of those commitments. And that's what I think is not fully implemented. Someone at the board, at the executive levels, ensuring some of these targets are being achieved, the greenwashing that John talked about. It's easy. The behavior, again, plastic bottles. But Europe, by the way, is 70% recycled plastic, Canada 72%, the US 11%. We do 29%, but we can't find any more recycled plastic. They should pass, in Canada we have a $130 million small business, and we pay a $2 million fee for the government to incent recycling. The US doesn't have that. And I've been trying to meet, Oregon has 88% the best in the state. I've met with that governor and several other governors, but I can't get them to roll it out nationally. It's a challenge.
John, can you maybe share with us a little bit more into the ESG investing from an investment viewpoint, things that you are avoiding or things you're particularly looking at?
So the team that we have has their own criteria, and I can't speak in total detail, but there's a screening process that they use, and they look at all the different sectors that we talked about, you know, the E, the S, and the G, when they do the screening process. And one of the things that people say, oh, you don't invest in energy. Well, actually, that's not true, because investing in energy is such a big thing. We'll invest, obviously, in all the renewables, right? If the companies have the governance and the social part, right? We'll invest, let's say, in pipelines. Why? Because we think transport of oil or whatever is important, but the pipelines in itself, we think that, you know, in the future, hydrogen's going to be a real big thing for cars and everything else, and it might be, you know, transported through these pipes as well. So it's not just not investing in that. Drillers is a sector that we look at things financially as well, not just ESG-wise. But if you take a typical explorer and driller, there's a higher risk that there's a possibility of an oil spill. And what does that do? Well, it pollutes the environment, for sure, right? We saw what happened years ago at BP and stuff like that. And what does that also do to the returns of the company? Not too good. So when our portfolio managers look at that, they rate that and they say, okay, well, this is a high risk, and it's non-ESG, it's not going to make it through our process. So it's little nuances like that that make a difference. It's not just we don't invest in certain sectors in general and stuff like that, but there's a meticulous reason and way and a proprietary method that is consistent over several years that is applied to every company that we look at. And it's very, very detailed, and we have several analysts and, looking at it and studying it to be able to make the decisions to do it in the way that my team feels comfortable with.
Thank you very much.
So I would like to thank both of you for this excellent conversation.
You mentioned, and I agree with you, regarding the commitments and how the monitoring of the achievement, let's say, of these commitments takes place. So I was wondering, has it happened that you have, let's say, checked the business model of companies that you want to invest, and although they say that they are ESG compliant and that they have these commitments, you have, let's say, found out that they do not really have such a business model and they do not really have realistic commitments. So what happened in that case, and what is the advice that you wish to give to such companies?
I have not run across a company that claims they're ESG compliant. I have seen many companies that talk about their commitment, putting processes in place, but it's a journey. So our job is, if we like the management, and if we don't, we change them pretty quickly, but based on performance as well as ESG commitments. And we push the conversation about what are we doing to be more environmentally friendly. Yes, what's the monthly P&L, what's the cash flow, what are our capital expenditure needs, but what are we doing to further being a better environmentally friendly, and what are we doing about equality in our operations. That is important. It doesn't come up as much as you would hope it does. And I think US, Europe, and Scandinavia do pretty well with that, but still not quite there.
On our end, we are, unlike most of the things that we deal with are extremely liquid. And some of our strategies might be concentrated in 50 publicly traded companies, whether they be US or global companies. And so when you're targeted with 50 companies, we are constantly monitoring these companies to see that they continue to fit our screen. And so what happens is, if forever, and like Dean, we don't see that many that are greenwashing and exaggerating whatever, but in the case that they do, everything that we do, we can sell within a minute. We typically at Calamos, we're very liquid. We deal mostly in liquid securities, and we're not in things that we can't get rid of within seconds. So, but we hold investments for years. So we're long-term investors, but mostly in liquid stuff, and we monitor because we don't have a huge universe. We concentrate on few names, and that's one of the advantages. If you get them right, your returns are better. But we're constantly monitoring them, and if anybody's not behaving within our screens, they're out and we put somebody else in.
Thank you, Mr. Metropoulos and Mr. Koudounis. Excellent presentations, and I really appreciate the opportunity for this question. My name is Stella Thomas. I work with the Global Water Fund, and right now I'm specifically working with the auto industry in the United States. We're working with the traditional auto car manufacturers, and we're working with the EV manufacturers. And interestingly enough, a well-known EV company, which I don't really want to mention right now, the board decided to vote against water footprinting. And as you know, electrical vehicles and a lot of the renewables take up a lot of water. And in the meantime, what they're doing too is the auto industry is making $400 million investments in Mexico that doesn't even have water. And so I guess my question is, it's very frustrating for me because when I deal with a lot of investors, I see a lot of great technologies out there, but the investors themselves do not have the knowledge about water specifically. We talk about energy, but we don't talk about the water-energy interplay. And I feel that a systemic approach is not being made to investments in the green field, in the climate field. And this is very frustrating for me because I work with the governments, I work with the technologists and the investors, but there's just, everyone's in their silo. And I think for me, not seeing that systemic approach. So how do you even begin to address that? I know it's a big question, but thank you.
I'll start, and hopefully you can clean that up. In my previous life, before I joined Calamos 7 years ago, I was CEO of Mizuho, one of the largest banks in the world. And at the time, I was actually the largest lender to the auto industry in the world. And so I would go around the world talking to all the CEOs and CFOs of all the companies in the sector. Of course, we led in Japan from Nissan to Toyota and all the Germans and the US. And a lot has happened 10 years ago when I was in that position to now. Back then, we were looking at it. We've started looking at it a lot more. I have to believe that if I'm lending several billions of dollars and I have these revolvers going out to these auto industries, that we have to continue to scrutinize. During the crisis in '08, we were the largest lender in the world in this sector because there weren't a lot of banks that were as solvent as the Japanese banks. And we were able to control some of that and put certain priorities because we were the only game in town and we could not only give our terms, but also, raise the prices when we needed to as well, so, which was nice. But when there's a ton of liquidity in the market and they can get money from everywhere, unfortunately the markets, the way they work, the standards start to fall down and they can't, the banks no longer give the terms. It's the capital markets that, whatever they can take. So I'm hoping that some of this stuff does get regulated, and that they continue to look at and scrutinize this even more. And I believe, and I'm in touch with, my former colleagues, that it is being scrutinized a lot more. But it comes from the heart of what makes these companies run. And these huge companies need the global banks to survive. And, if they can set the standards a little bit better every year, that will help everybody.
I can't say that I know enough about the industry and the water, but I did read something about Elon Musk making some comments just about 2-3 months ago. And he expressed concern about water and how EV needs to transition to reinvent aspects of the EV car manufacturing to preserve water. A leader like that, and I think the guy is a very brilliant man. By the way, he does do some things with Peter Diamandis as well. I think he's addressing it, but to your frustration, it is very difficult to see commitment and strong progress, particularly with traditional car companies. And you mentioned the Mexican, you're absolutely right. Mexico has got a lot of water shortages, and they're building manufacturing, and it's going to require a lot of water. I'm not exactly sure I have an answer to your concern as to what we're going to be able to do to make water an ESG cars rather ESG friendly. I really don't know, but I do know people are talking about that industry and how water needs to be redefined as far as the industry is concerned. So that's.
Hello, my name is Corina Fratelli. I'm representing Fairlife Lung Cancer Care, and I'm wondering how health issues and health inequalities are interrelated with ESG. Thank you.
Environment, social, it's related to the social part of it. We're all trying through philanthropy, through education, through recognizing the evolution of change. And in some of the more modern countries and educated countries, you're seeing more regulation. You're seeing a lot more pressure for diversity. You're seeing a lot more pressure for a social net that protects human beings. Still a long way from where we need to be. But if you look at a lot of places, particularly in Asia, it is still a very historic environment that has long-term traditions that are not addressing some of these issues. I think the openness of our cell phones and all the communications around the world and the progress a lot of countries are making around those issues and all these discussions we're having here and the meeting we had in LA 3 or 4 weeks ago, again, 68 countries, including many from Asia. So those executives, those investors, they do go back because we relate to them in a lot of these discussions, and they care. They seem to care. They're educated people. So I think it'll penetrate, and but it'll be very slow in coming in a lot of parts of the world. Africa, Asia, Scandinavia is, I think, the lead, and it's a wonderful example for all of us.
I think also, if I could add and be a little bit more specific to the health aspect of ESG, that's a major aspect of what we screen for. I mean, there's a lot of companies that emit a lot of carbon when they're manufacturing and stuff. You know, we all, have seen movies and stuff where, people are living near plants and, they're dying of cancer, lung cancer and everything else. That's really, really important. And that's something that we have to look at, and we screen for that. And if we find companies that emit a lot of pollution, we don't invest in them. We don't want to give them liquidity in order to keep going on. If they don't fix that, we don't want them to, we don't want to be the ones that are providing liquidity to do that. I think it's really important. People need to do that. And that's why I think it's important to invest in ESG for people that are doing it the right way to admit to that. And there's a lot of things that also, I don't want to politicize this, but the way we create energy, sometimes people think that doing it one way is better than not. And, unfortunately, in my opinion, our administration in the United States took a policy in the last couple of years. But if you look at, for the better, but if you look at the net results, because now China and everybody else is creating a lot more dirty energy, we're actually worse off than we were a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So that's really, really important. Your words matter, and things matter. And that health is really important. We all want to live, our kids, our grandkids. So it's important for us to take this seriously.
Just a last thought. I'm very close with J.P. Morgan. I can tell you, both Goldman and J.P. Morgan have been strongly advocating the company as part of its philosophy is very supportive of ESG. And I can tell you they're very active about ESG investing and lending. And they've really been funding, they just funded a wonderful program with Nature Conservancy, buying several million acres of beautiful open land. So a lot of people are embracing the concept, and that's where my hope lies, that we will address it. Thank you.